Is this on? Yep. Hi, everybody. I'm John Spector. I'm the chair of Bookstock, and I want to welcome you to the official opening ceremony of Bookstock 2025. It's very exciting. I know Bookstock was going on all afternoon until lightning struck. I don't know if you were all on the green, but we closed it a little bit early for safety reasons. But we had a great afternoon. It was a terrific kickoff to the 3-day event, and I hope all of you will visit tomorrow and Sunday. We have all of the things on the green: the used book sale, we have 40 exhibitors. We have the children's tent. If you have kids, there's a, what do you call it? The read around where you walk around the green and you have to walk around the entire story walk or whatever. What is it called? Story walk. Yeah. Adults are allowed to read the book too. What am I leaving out? We have the soapbox where local authors and visitors are reading from their fiction and nonfiction. We have music. We have food. And we have raffles. We have great prizes. Thank you, Angela. When we first started this journey in August of 2024, we thought, oh, this is, we've got like 8 months. This is not going to be hard. And it turns out that it is hard. And in August, I was certain that we were going to reach this moment on Friday evening, the first event. And as it got closer and closer, I was less and less certain. But the reason we reached this moment is because we had a fantastic team of people that were dedicated, kind of a core team of 10 or 12 people, close to 100 volunteers, fantastic sponsors, fantastic venue partners. I'm going to mention Artistree in a minute. Fantastic donors. And it really, it's taken a huge community to sort of put this together and to restart it after a year in which it wasn't, it had gotten canceled. I just want to mention Artistree because two things. First, I want to mention the Shire, who's sort of I don't know what their name of theirs, where's Dan? What's their category of sponsorship? Is it have a name? Presenting sponsor. That's the highest. And they and along with some other folks have given us free rooms and discounted rooms to house all of our visitors and so forth. And Artistree here tonight, I will also mention, they are donating this beautiful space, which is, a kind of a rare thing, which is great. And so I want to tell you what their mission is for those of you how many of you know Artistree? Okay, so that's, Azusa, that's a good sign. Most people know that. Okay, Artistree's mission, I'm going to read this because it's a long mission statement. Artistree's mission is to build community through the arts and to make creative experiences accessible to everyone. Donations support this mission by funding classes, outreach programs, scholarships, performances, and exhibits that serve people of all ages throughout the community. And it's a great organization, and even though you're not technically in Woodstock, we love you still. So, yeah, a great hand. So Azusa, thank you to you and your colleagues at Artistree. Yeah, no, it's a great partnership. Okay, I think okay, so I lost my notes. Turn off your cell phones. Is there other things that I'm probably forgetting a couple of things? But I'm going to turn it over now to one of our core team members, Robin Fisher, who is going to introduce you to tonight's program. Is that right?
Hello, it's nice to see you all. Thank you for coming. We have, oh yeah, you're much taller. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's perfect, thank you. I am here because my beloved former student is performing her poetry tonight. Her name is Bimpe Fagiembo. I love her. I first met her as a student in my class at Rutgers University, and it was then that we both realized she had just an extraordinary talent for poetry. Since then, Bimpe has published 2 books of poetry, and her work is archived in collections at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Library of Congress, and has been featured at the National Gallery of Art and on PBS. In 2022, she adapted her first book of poetry into a short narrative film entitled Boju Wayne, which won honorable mention for Best Narrative Film at the Los Angeles Film Awards. This film is so fabulous. I was mesmerized watching it. And her next one, I got a peek, and it's going to win huge awards. She is currently on her second film and a third literary project, and I could not be more proud and happy to introduce my beloved former student, Bimpe Fagiyembo.
Good evening. This first poem I've prepared three for us this evening. I'm going to raise this back up and maybe slide this over a bit. This first poem is Speaker of the House. And while I was sitting, I was thinking that home has a voice. I was thinking about how babies, right, as they're growing in the womb, that they know the voice of their home, and I hope all of us do too. Where is your home? Who speaks from your house? Whose voice is the voice of reason, and for what reason do you listen? When you intuit, only half-healed but are wholly human, on this strength, where is it that you say you are going? And on whose voice are you moving forward and mountains? And you see, this is why sight can only initiate but never deliver the truth. Because the lonely man looks a lot like the man alone, and I have known the voice of both. And well, how can two walk together unless they've agreed to do so? So I agree. With the voice from home, so that I will be home everywhere. I agree that my voice is as long as I am perfect. And trust me, I'm not. I agree with the voice from home, so that I will be home everywhere. And life, I think the life that we hope to live is the conclusion of this agreement. Thank you, Speaker of the House. Maybe, can you hear me now? Okay. I'll speak up. My voice is actually I lost my voice last night and did my very best to bring it back, and this is it doing its best. This next poem is Freedom for Freedom. I actually, fun fact, I began doing the research for this poem while I was in Vermont. And as often as I am able to read this poem to a group of people, I will. You are a fight so worthy that one woman would risk freedom for freedom. This young woman who is counted out and scarred, marked with the scar on the head, perhaps a symbol, a sign of a sixth sense. The kind of sense so divinely foolish, it was wisdom. I mean, she couldn't read a map, but she could read the heavens, and well, who needs a map when the stars answer to you? Araminta Ross knew how to be abased and knew when it was time to abound. She, one young Black woman, but a majority. Set out as Araminta, came back a Moses, because that's what freedom will do. It will call you by a new name. So this majority walked. Maryland to Delaware, 197 miles. Delaware to Pennsylvania, 94 miles. That's 291 miles from who you thought I was to who I say I am. Harriet Tubman fought a fight so worthy, she risked freedom for freedom. She put Araminta and Harriet, in the palm of each hand, put them together and prayed her way through pitch-black valleys, shadows, death, rivers, rivers as deep as the many souls that we've lost in water. Don't you know that every ocean floor from here to Africa carries the souls of ancestors past? Araminta Ross walked through waters, baptized with each step, one step closer to the freedom that she said that she would die to see. One step closer to Harriet. Because God, it's not how you start the race, it's how you finish it. Araminta started it, but Harriet would be the one to finish it. But I think she was always Harriet, if you understand what I'm saying. Jesus didn't become the Messiah until he rose, but he was always the Messiah. So she went on to make it or to die, to remain or to become. She made it. She knew that there was a home for her, and that home was not where she was going, but rather who and what she could be when she got there. But not alone. A fight so worthy that one woman would risk her freedom for yours. Harriet Tubman didn't know what would become of Black liberty, but she left us a legacy that told us that in our lifetimes that we are worthy of the fight. And I know that we are treading on hope from Emmett Till to Tyree Nichol, yet in our lifetimes, we are worthy of the fight. She left us a legacy that told us that you better live like you have the right to. A fight so worthy that you too would risk freedom for freedom. A people so worthy of a fight that, yes, may last your lifetime. And yet, while you fight, you better live like you have the right to. Thank you. This last poem is EYM. EYM, it is the initials of my grandmother, Esther Yetunde Masaku. I reference her a lot in this poem. I reference women a lot in this poem. But I think beyond my grandmother, beyond women, this is a poem about legacy. And we all are a part of someone else's legacy. And it's a very sobering realization or humbling rather, to realize that others will be a part of ours as well. One of the greatest gifts I've ever received from a woman is her life and her legacy. I exist as the legacy of a woman who thought herself important enough to even have one. A woman who, though she would have never said it aloud, I think believed in reincarnation, that she would return as the victory of her war. A woman who lived like my life was her life, like she carried our names in the palms of her hands, like she didn't need to know you because she knew herself. And well, if she could exist, then certainly you could too. Like what God could do once could be done twice. A woman who would never admit defeat for no other reason than the idea of calling those things that be not as though they were. A woman for whom dignity is. A woman who is always happy to see me because I am evidence that she can't die, like my life is her second coming. A woman who went 12 rounds with this world for me. A woman who would fight her demons for me. A woman who would fight my demons for me. A woman who would fight me for me. Do you know such a woman? Do you know of these women? There are women saving our lives, giving up theirs, walking into spaces and places not grand enough to hold their dignity, and yet they stayed. So that we might build spaces and places of our own, divine enough to hold our divinity. We are the legacies of women who we know and who we don't know, who we've read about and who history won't allow us to. The legacies of women who thought themselves important enough to even have them. And here we all are. One of the greatest gifts that I've ever received from a woman is her life and her legacy. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. What do you like? What would you like? Yeah, I think I'm done. We're done? Yeah. 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 Any questions maybe, I guess? Yes. That's a very good question. So I find myself very fortunate that I am a stream of consciousness poet. So I write essentially, not essentially, exactly. I write down my thoughts as I am thinking them. And so again, I feel very fortunate that that's the art, that's the gift that I've been given within this art. So yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, that's really hard to follow. I'm a stream of consciousness talker. Unfortunately, you'll be hearing, oh my God, what if it rains? Okay, sorry. Thank you, Bimpe. And Bimpe is also going to be teaching a workshop on Sunday. Last I looked, I think there might be 1 or 2 spots left. So if you're interested in more of Bimpe, which I am, look on our website. You can sign up. Okay, my name is Julie Monkton, and I am the co-executive director for Bookstock. And I am super excited for the next part of this program. We have 3 authors. They are all local authors from the Upper Valley who have published a book in less than 3 months ago. So it's very new, it's all local, and we couldn't be more excited. So the format for this is I'm going to do a very quick introduction of each author, and they are going to mesmerize and entrance you, but just for 15 minutes. Okay, and then we're not going to go to questions. Then I'll introduce the next author, same thing, mesmerize and trance, third author, mesmerize and trance, and then we'll finish. And afterwards, we are going to have more food, drinks in the music room adjacent to us, and we will have the awesome folks at Yankee selling books. And you can then meet with the authors and talk to them one-on-one, spend some time asking questions. So we're going to start off with our first, this not only has Bimpe great, but she's tall. Okay, we're going to start off with a first, okay. The music stand. I like being anonymous. Okay, sorry. Okay. The first author we have is Erin Starmer. Erin is the author of more than a dozen middle grade and young adult novels, including the Riverman trilogy, the Locker 37 series, The Only Ones, and Spontaneous, which was adapted into a critically acclaimed film from Paramount Pictures. His books have been translated into multiple foreign languages and have appeared on Best of the Year lists from Time Magazine, The Wall Street Journal, the New York Public Library, Yalza, Bank Street College of Education, Chicago Public Library, and School Library Journal. He's got a lot of creds. He lives in Waterbury, Vermont with his wife and 2 children. Thank you, Erin.
Thank you, Julie. I'm used to speaking to children. I go to a lot of schools. So if you guys are being rowdy, I'll clap my hands twice and you can all quiet down. That's the signal. As Julie said, I've written a number of books. I have trouble keeping count of them these days. I've been doing this for about 16, 17 years. And I actually traveled to Woodstock about 16, 17 years ago, stayed at the Shire on New Year's Eve, and my wife was very angry because we skied all day and I fell asleep at about 9:30. But it's wonderful to be back. I have sort of family roots in the area. My uncle owned a farmhouse down in Bridgewater in the 60s, and I have a book called The Only Ones, which is partly based on Woodstock, and it's a combination of Woodstock and Hanover because it's a story of some children that one day everyone in the world disappears except for this group of children, and they all come together in a small town with a very nice town square, and some very dark and strange things happen on that town square, and when the book came out, Yankee Bookshop actually was one of the first bookstores where I ever saw my book in the front window. So that was very special to me. And I was actually down there a couple weeks ago when my latest book, Night Swimming, came out. And I saw Carrie and Christian, and I did a little tour of all the bookstores in Vermont in 2 days, on the Vermont bookstore tour. I encourage everyone to go get your Vermont bookstore tour passport and go see all those. I don't recommend doing it in 2 days like I did, but thematically it was linked to my novel, which is called Night Swimming. And it's a novel for teenagers, but teenagers that are teenagers now, but also people who were teenagers at one point, which I think some of us were. And when I visit schools, people often ask me, where did I get the ideas for my novels? And I think that's a common question for everyone. And sometimes it just comes to you. Sometimes it's stream of consciousness. But this novel has been about 32 years in the making. It started when I was in high school, and we were reading the John Cheever story, The Swimmer, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. It was made into a movie with Burt Lancaster in the 60s. And if you know that short story, it's about a man who swims through his town, goes to different people's pools and swims across his town, and then he gets home, and it's kind of surreal. The story made a big impression, not necessarily on me, but on a friend of mine, who said, we should do that in our town. We should go and sneak into all the pools in our town and go swim in all the pools in our town. We didn't do that. But the idea was in my mind. Okay, what if some kids did that? Now I will say the statute of limitations is probably gone by now. I did sneak into a pool or two when I was a teenager, but we never had a grand mission like that. But that's what happens in this novel. Two characters, Trevor and Sarah, decide right after their graduation from high school that they're going to swim in every pool in their town. So they set out on this mission and sneak in to pools at night. And it starts to be a budding romance. Nothing necessarily happens in the beginning. And it's a realistic slice of life from the 90s. And the idea that I originally had, like I said, came from this friend. But I sat on it for a while. I went off to college. I studied English. I studied film. I saw a movie that I don't know if many people here would have seen, but it was Louis Buñuel's The Exterminating Angel. If you've seen that movie, it gives away the secret of this book, which I'm not going to give away now. But it was something that stuck with me. And it's certainly not something I can bring up when I speak to high schoolers, because it's certainly not a movie. A Spanish art film from the 1960s is not what kids are into these days. But there was an idea behind it. I said, well, if I can combine this story of my youth with this sort of speculative twist, which happens at about a third of the way through the book, I think I have something there. Life got in the way, or other projects got in the way. I wrote lots of other books, but I always wanted to revisit this idea. And you know, when you're working in the children's book industry, they often want you to write contemporary books because that's what speaks to young people. But when I was a kid in the 1980s, there was that sort of big boom of boomer nostalgia that, you know, we all experienced, and it really spoke to me in a certain way, in that it was giving me access to what my parents' life was like. It was just giving me access to a time in history and connecting me to the 50s and 60s in ways I hadn't before. So I think the The biggest purveyor of that, certainly with my generation, was Stephen King. Lots of people read Stephen King novels, and you can think of things like his story, The Body, which was made into the movie Stand By Me. And so when I sat down to write this novel, I said, all right, I want to capture some of that feeling, but I don't want to do nostalgia for nostalgia's sake. Nostalgia can be a dirty word for people, especially in our day and age when people are saying, life was so much better back then. Well, it wasn't better for a lot of people, but you certainly look at things with rose-tinted glasses. So I wanted to write something that spoke to young people today and also spoke to people like me that grew up in the 90s. And I wanted to do it without those rose-tinted glasses. So I found one more thing that influenced me, which I'm sure a lot of you have probably seen the Richard Linklater movie Dazed and Confused, which is the story of summertime when in the 1970s, when all these high schoolers get together and they have these sort of hazing parties and things like that. And it's just a slice of life in Texas in the 1970s. But there was one particular line in the movie where one of the characters said to the other characters, "Man, the 60s were so cool, but obviously the 70s are lame." And me, as a high school in the 90s watching this movie, I said, "Man, the 70s were so cool. The 90s are lame." And I read an interesting article today in the New York Times about how teenagers, there used to be an arc of happiness in your life. And as you were young, it went up to this peak. And then it dipped down in your 20s and 30s as you're sort of confronting life and paying rent and trying to find your career. And then it sort of swoops back up when you're in your late 40s, early 50s, which I'm happy about because that's where I am. And that sort of was the case all around the world. They studied all around the world. Apparently that arc has changed, where people in their late teens and early 20s are starting really low now, and they're climbing their way up. And I wanted this book to speak to those kids. And as I said, it's a story of what happens after graduation when a bunch of people are confronting what are they going to do with their lives. And they decide to have this little mission before they go off to college or go off and get a job. But it's a very scary time, and it's a very difficult time, but it's also a wondrous time. I probably have a couple minutes left, so I'd love to read the first couple pages. So if a lot of people might not know this, but the title comes from a famous song of the time by the band REM. And when I wrote the book, I formatted it as a mixtape. So each chapter is a title of a song, either from that era or something kids might have been listening to at that era. And there is an A and B side, like any great mixtape. And the A side is a lot different than the B side in terms of what music is on it and what it means to me. But there's all sorts of Easter eggs in this book, culled from lyrics and album covers and things like that kids today won't get, but I hope that the ones that really like the book will dig back into it. And people my age, I hope it stirs up these feelings, especially ones that have teenagers that are going through the same thing. As Julie reminded me, there's a review that said, this is the perfect graduation gift. So if you know any graduates, buy them 5 or 6 of these. So I'm just going to read the very beginning, and then I'm going to pass the torch. They were floating. It didn't feel the least bit like real life. 12 years, 13 counting kindergarten, an eternity, now in the rear view. Trevor's hand was out the car window, a dolphin swimming away from Sutton High through the muggy June air. Sarah was driving, as always. And as always, she was driving the Toyota Tercel, a family car passed down 2 years ago when her older sister Janine departed for Tufts. Janine had called it the Silver Bullet, but Sarah referred to it as the Rat. A demotion on account of rust and dents and stains? Perhaps. It was a loving name, though. The Rat was a survivor. It had seen Sarah through so much. Long detours in the farmlands after her multiple breakups with Mike, road trips to Rochester and Vermont to see fish, pre-dawn journeys to basketball practice and late-night commutes home from the job at Wegmans, and of course, the drives to school. To school and from school every weekday for the last 2 years. For the final 6 months of senior year, Trevor joined her, proudly sitting shotgun. An assorted list of guest stars rode in the back. Jared, Schultz, and Bev had been the other regulars, the core. But ever since Bev saved up and got a Civic in March, those three usually rode together, separately, like today. Yes, today it was only Sarah and Trevor. They both preferred it that way, even though they were hesitant to admit it. Wow, Sarah said, as she shook her head in disbelief. Wow what? Trevor asked. Just wow. It's over, huh? That's it. Yeah. What else was there to say? Class of 94 had made it. Graduation ceremony was still to come, but school was D-O-N-E done. Regents requirements met, AP tests in the book, everything complete. Trevor had prepared for it, talked and thought about it constantly, but now that it was here, he didn't know what to do. So he turned on the stereo. A mix was in the deck, one that Sarah called Sun/Rain. One side had songs with sun in their titles, the other side rain. It was on the sun side. The sun side always got more play. Trevor let the music do the talking for a while as they passed the fields on Sudbury, all dusty and bulldozed, ready for development. Soon enough, construction would start. Houses with pastel paint jobs, flimsy transplanted trees, and in-ground pools would erupt from the weeds, though probably not before Trevor would leave for college. When he returned home next summer, however, he'd be coming back to a slightly different world. What time does Schultz's party start? Trevor asked. Already started, Sarah said. I saw them pouring Zimas into Sprite bottles at lunch, then heading for the parking lot. Should we go straight there? Sarah reached over to Trevor's thigh and gave it a pat, mostly fingertips, and paused for a moment to look at him before saying, yeah, straight there. So I'm going to give other people a chance. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Julie, and everyone involved in Bookstock. And I hope to talk to some of you people afterwards. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. That was great. Mixtapes. Come on. Okay. The next author I'm going to introduce is Sasha Hum. Sasha Hum is a text-based artist. Her first novella, Sidework, was a new immigrant writing series selection and was published by Black Lawrence Press in March of 2025. Her fiction and nonfiction can be found in The Millions, Leon Literary Review, Exposition Review, Quelly Journal, Literary Mama, and Brink. She is a recipient of an Elizabeth George Award, a Sustainable Arts Foundation grant, Vermont Artist Development Award, a Brink Literary Journal Award for hybrid writing, and is a Holden Scholarship awardee. She is a goat farmer and a homeschooling mother of 4. Wow. That's the biggest accolade in my mind. Okay, forget the others. Okay. After a decade of living in canvas tents in California, she and her family fled wildfires and now live in a yurt on 600 acres of cooperatively owned land in central Vermont, where she finds herself frequently cold. Welcome, Sasha. Give it up.
All these tall people. So this is my book, Sidework. Should I say about it? It's I consider it, I guess, kind of autofiction, or somebody might consider it autofiction. I just call it fiction, but a lot of it is based on my own experience, and it's about a homeless Korean adoptee waitress and mother of 4 who is working at a kind of diner, a restaurant, and it takes place within a shift. So it's like a Sunday breakfast shift as she's waiting tables and interacting with customers. And it's kind of like if you've ever worked in the restaurant business, you're kind of trapped. And time does this weird thing. It gets like really, really crazy, and it kind of slows down as you're like juggling all these plates and orders, and you're just like crazy. And then there's those times where it's so slow, and it's just like, watching butter melt in the cold. So I was really trying to play with time and what it feels like also to be somebody who doesn't know where they're going to sleep that night and is wondering, what are their children doing now, and where are they, and has her husband taken them to go wash in the community pool? And as she's doing this, she's having these interactions with all these crazy customers. One who she calls Death, or the Grim Reaper. And just the genesis for the book is that, so like in my bio, my family and I lived in canvas tents for about a decade. And we lived on an intentional community in California then. And I've always been a writer. And as a mother, sometimes it's hard to let yourself write and give yourself permission to be like, this is important. Like, my form of self expression is important. And it got to the point where, my husband went through a PhD program, and I was a part of that because we were making work together, but my work was still on the back burner. So I was waitressing, and I was the only one supporting our family. So I was like the sole breadwinner, and I felt entitled. I'm like, okay, I'm bringing home the bacon. I'm going to go take some time and write. And we were only living in a canvas tent. So it got to the point where I was like, I have enough extra money so I can rent a studio. And it was just down the hill. So I was renting a studio, and I was doing my work. And I was waitressing part time. And I just felt like I had the perfect life living in a tent with my children. And so I applied to an MFA program. And I got in, and it was fully funded. I told them, I was like, there's no way I can go unless I don't have to pay a cent. And they said, sure, you can come. And so I did that. And that's when I started this. I started the book when I was in my MFA program. And while I was in that MFA program, we evacuated maybe 3 times. So each year there was a fire. And when you live in a canvas tent, you can't close the doors, you can't close the windows and keep smoke out. So we'd have to go somewhere. And it was always like really disruptive. And so I think it was 2020, and I just lost my job because of the pandemic. And the fire came, and it was huge. It was a lightning complex fires in Sonoma County and Napa County, and the skies were like post-apocalyptic. It was like nothing I'd ever seen. And we couldn't go anywhere because usually we'd go to my mom's house or we'd go somewhere, but everywhere was on fire, and nobody was opening their doors to us because it was COVID. So we're like, we tried to go camp out next to our friends in Oregon, and then we did that for a little bit, and then we left, and the whole place burned down. And then we went and tried to stay with a friend in the Bay Area in Richmond, and it got to the point where the fires were like, the smoke was leaking through the windows, and we had air purifiers and everything, and the adults just started to get a little like blary-eyed and like weird, and the kids were okay. But my husband had this moment where he's like, if we don't leave now, I'm not going to be able to leave. So we're like, okay, let's go. We left, we went home, we grabbed all we could, and we just went east. And we said, okay, let's get out of the fire. Let's see how far we have to drive before we're out of smoke. And we were driving through, like, the freeway was on fire, and there was smoke, and it was just crazy. And we drove for 23 hours straight, and we were still in smoke. So we kept going. And that's how we ended up in Vermont. But during that time, too, I was in my MFA program. So I was writing portions of this book and sending in different like excerpts and essays and communicating like at rest stops and just wherever. And this was sort of like, this was not like my, like, what would you call it? Like my soul project. It was like that project that like that you keep really close and have been working on for 2 decades. That one has not seen the light, but that's okay. It's probably for the best. And this one was for fun. And I really wanted to play with form and that feeling of time. Like I was saying, when you're working in a restaurant or you don't have a home and time does weird things. And so yeah, and I was also really trying to play with texture and space and how like you can be in this one place in the restaurant and then just go to like a different time in her life where she's like wondering about her birth parents and making connections to like one's like DNA and family lineage with her like wolf dogs who are totally unruly and keep making them lose housing. Which is true. I think we've lost houses or tent spots like 3 times because of our dogs. um, so yeah, it was for me. It was a fun project, and I also wanted it to be like fast paced. And so the background of the story is that they used to live in an intentional community, and that land was sold, um, and that's what rendered them unhoused. Um, and she's still working at the diner, and they're just kind of living in their van and camping and all that stuff. Um, and yeah, I think I'll just read an excerpt from it. Um, this excerpt, and it's in small sections, so it's kind of like short pieces, and they accrue, and each one has a different sort of tone or flavor. Some are more scene-like, some are more poetic, and this one is much more like scene-like, and it's called Death on Aisle 9. Outside of the community, if you're wealthy market, the one that charges 2.5 times more than Whole Foods for celery, the children read library books on their stomachs in the grass, spread out as if this were their motherfucking living room. We go there because my husband likes to use their Wi-Fi and alcohol-free Sani wipes, even though their parking lot is always full. My children throw their sweaters onto the skinny limbs of new cherry trees in the market's edible garden. We are big fans of edible landscaping. All of their worldly possessions, glass beads, pine cones, carved sticks, yesterday's underwear, leak out of their backpacks that are set too close to the automatic doors. People always tell me that my kids seem so comfortable wherever they are. Well, when you're homeless, I might say, or home free, as they're calling it now, all public space is your home, and time is your residence. My youngest daughter lacks a filter. She likes to talk to strangers. She once asked a heavyset woman in the checkout line, "Why do you have so many chins?" She asked her doctor, "Why does your stomach look like it's pregnant?" When we were living at the intentional if you're not wealthy community, a potential investor in one of the community's latest cottage industries / business schemes visited us at our campsite where we used to live in canvas hunting tents, so technically not homeless, but not homed either by some standards. My youngest daughter was swinging recklessly on her rope swing. The investor was leaning against a tree where my pea rag hung. From too high up, she yelled at him, "My mother wipes her vagina with that." And he recoiled, his hand as if stung. So at the community, if you're wealthy market, my daughter wanders over to this older couple and asks, "Why is your bag so big? It has so many zippers. Why?" The woman looks down at her side hanging bag, like the bicycle messenger kind with the buckles, and says, patiently smiling, "This was my son's bag." At first, the strangers are charmed. They're always charmed. My youngest daughter has this round, sweet face and huge eyes with lashes that extend to her hairline like a grubby anime character, self-named Princess Dirty Face, with dreaded hair, barefoot, wearing mismatched leg warmers. "Why did your son give you his bag?" my daughter asks. "Well, our son passed away, so I guess now we have his bag." "My friend just hung himself. How did yours pass?" At first, I am alarmed, but they don't seem surprised. In fact, they seem encouraged and begin to tell her all about their son, how his name was Mikey, how he had a dog named Bodie and had just gotten divorced from this really nice lady. Then, one dark and stormy night, the lady says, like this is fucking story hour, Mikey was upset and took Bodie and drove away. They drove and drove right off a cliff, and Mikey died. Then my daughter asks, "Did the dog die?" "No, the dog did not die. He's in our car right now. He just broke his leg. You want to meet him?" At this point, I'm starting to have mixed feelings. Like, on the one hand, why are you telling my 4-year-old this? And on the other hand, yeah, why not talk about death at the supermarket, death at the deli, suicide at the dentist's, murder at the laundromat, pandemics at the diner? And why not with a 4-year-old? Why not with my 4-year-old? I tried to pull my daughter closer because maybe the woman is crazy, even though she is shopping at the community if you're wealthy market that, thankfully, does take food stamps. So then the woman says, "We're not sure if it was suicide." My daughter gets this expression on her face, like she's listening to Belinda Carlisle on the overhead speakers. The woman's husband mistakes her head tilt as confusion, but I know that look. It's not confusion, it's clarity. He says, we don't know if he meant to drive off the cliff to die, as if to explain or soften what suicide is. But there's no protecting these kids. My daughter says, if he meant to, he wouldn't have taken his dog. And the mother breaks down and cries. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That was excellent. Okay, and our last speaker tonight is Annette. Where are you? Okay. Oh, good. Phew. Okay. Okay. Annette Binder. Annette Binder, she's from New Hampshire, but we still love her. Okay. Annette Binder's short stories have appeared in the Pushcart and No Henry Prize anthologies and been performed on public radio selected shorts. Her story collection, Rise, received the Mary McCarthy Prize, and her novel, The Vanishing Sky, was a New York Times Book Review selection for summer and an Indie Next Pick. Annette's new book, Child of Earth and Starry Heaven, is a memoir of motherhood, memory, and memory loss. Kirkus calls it an illuminating and moving meditation on dementia. Annette lives in New Hampshire, but it's okay, with her family. Thank you, Annette. Oh, come on, Annette. Sorry, come on down. You could.
Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah? Oh, thank you so much, Julie. It's so lovely to be here. My book, Child of Earth and Starry Heaven, was not actually a book that I had thought about writing or really intended to write. It was really the product of my trying to make sense of what was happening to my mother during her struggle with dementia. And I really wrote this in pieces as I was researching what it was, what memory was, memory loss, and personhood. And I started with something that was familiar to me. I was a classics major in school and went on to graduate school in classics. And so I went back to the Greeks and to the Romans and started with Cicero and Aristotle and then worked my way outwards and looked at, what the ancients thought about memory and memory loss and old age and personhood. And then I expanded to look at modern science and mythology and other cultures and tried to make sense of what was happening to my mother at just an alarming rate. But first, a little bit about my mother. Both of my parents are from Germany, and I came to the US as a small child, so they spoke German at home. And my mother was possibly the most self-reliant, resilient person I've ever known. She wore lipstick to shovel the snow. She cleaned her own rain gutters well into her 70s. She was up on that ladder, and she wouldn't have it any other way. She changed the oil on her 74 Chevy Nova because the fellows at Jiffy Lube were a little sloppy. And so as her memory started to fade, I really was blind to it because I really saw my mother as this incredibly independent, self-sufficient person. And I didn't notice what was really happening for much longer. I really should have picked up on it much more quickly. And it was made even harder for me to notice because of her own eccentricities, of which there were many. No ATM cards ever. Very iffy about credit cards. She thought they were a little questionable. She had problems with technology, and when she wanted to watch an episode of The Sopranos or Desperate Housewives on her DVR, we could spend up to 45 minutes on the telephone as I tried to walk her through where that darn episode was. And so as she started to have these cognitive lapses, I just thought, well, it's just she's technologically challenged, but otherwise so resilient and so strong that I was able to talk myself out of really coming to grips with what was going on with her. And so I'm just going to read a couple of short excerpts from the book that sort of trace the trajectory. And this first one is when I really should have picked up on things, and yet I still didn't. I'm driving my mother back home after we've spent the afternoon together. She's just moved from Colorado out to New Hampshire to a townhouse just 20 minutes from my house, and we see each other almost every day. She's taken to talking for hours at a time. She's telling me that she just had people over to her house, people she'd known in Canada in the 1950s and in Colorado in the 1980s. And the story is similar in its rhythm and its dramas to stories about coffee clutches she told me countless times before. But the people and the chronology aren't right. I don't realize yet what's happening, that something has gone wrong inside her brain. I think instead that she might just be tired, and that by correcting her, I can fix her disordered thinking. And so I say, Mom, how would people who lived in different places 30 or 40 years apart get together at your house here in New Hampshire? And she thinks about this for a long while before nodding. It was difficult, she concedes. And then she goes on with her story. I really should have picked up on it at this point and didn't. It really wasn't until she'd stopped taking all of her diabetes medicine after being so disciplined for decades and not needing insulin. Sheer German discipline kept her blood sugar completely under control, and then all at once it was gone. That discipline was gone. And so I got her a pill dispenser, put her pills in for the week, told her, now take your pills tomorrow morning. The next day when I came to visit, I realized she'd taken them all, the whole week. And that's when I realized. And then I couldn't really deny it to myself anymore. And so her decline was steep, so much steeper than other people around her who had Alzheimer's or dementia as well. And I couldn't help compare what was happening with my mother. It's almost like a parent comparing children meeting developmental milestones. You know, so-and-so is talking already. And well, only it was the reverse with my mom, and sort of watching how much more quickly she was fading. It broke me wide open. And so I started to research ways that I might help her. There was not much that the doctors were really offering her. And so I started researching the science. And I read about 40 hertz clicks possibly helping clear out some of the tangles and plaques, and 40 hertz flashes of light possibly helping as well. So my mom would come visit us at our house. She'd hang out with my daughter, Georgia. They'd watch Bewitched together or Gilligan's Island, and she would sit in a chair that vibrated at the 40 hertz frequency that the researchers at MIT had used and found that it was possibly beneficial. So she'd sit there with a cup of decaf, watching Gilligan and the skipper, and the chair would vibrate and hum and do its thing. And I kept waiting for some improvement, or at least a slowing down of the decline, and it just wasn't happening. And so then I got the headset with the flashing lights that went right into the skull, and that thing was not cheap. And I thought, well, maybe that will help. So we put that headset on, and she didn't seem to mind. If she had a little decaf and a little piece of cake, it was okay. And again, nothing. And so she went from independent living in the townhouse to living with a nurse's aide in the townhouse to assisted living to memory care, all within the span of about 18 months. I mean, it just went so fast. Exercise, supplements, the personal trainer that we found for her who specialized in elder care, and there was nothing to be done other than spending time with her. And so that's what I did. Every day, hours at the memory care. And I basically spent so much time on that floor that it felt like a second home to me, and I got to know the other residents there. And there were so many days of utter despair in that memory care, but there were also days where there was gratitude and there was grace. And not the easy sort of gratitude where you say, well, at least my life is good and, you know, that I've got so much to be thankful for. I mean, that's totally a worthwhile form of gratitude. But I'm talking about gratitude for what I saw on that second floor memory care facility. And so this is one moment. I'm going to skip the moments of despair, and I'm going to go to a moment of gratitude. My mother's senses are dulled by the disease, and mine have somehow become sharper. It's July, and the scenery is almost overwhelming. The apples growing on the branches, the cloudless summer sky. This is suffering's lesson. Pay attention, writer Sarah Manguso tells us. The important part might come in a form you do not recognize. You might not know to love it, but to pay attention is to love everything. And all at once, I see colors in the hills that I've never noticed before. Gradations and variations from lime to celadon to deepest emerald. And everywhere things are growing. The tomatoes hanging low on their vines, and the monarchs hovering over the milkweed in the meadow behind our house. And it's too much, all of it. I'm drowning in the beauty of my least favorite season. Pay attention. There is an old man on the second floor who sits for hours in his wheelchair. I've never heard his voice, though people tell me he can speak. He sits in silence and watches everyone who passes by. He eats all his meals at the counter and not with the other residents at their tables. One of the aides pushes his chair to his spot and tucks his napkin into his dress shirt. It takes the old man an hour to eat, sometimes longer. He lifts the fork to his mouth incrementally, and often the food will hover in the air for an eternity, just inches from his open mouth. His efforts glitch and reboot, and sometimes he manages to get the fork moving again. Other times the food falls to the floor and he starts the process over, working his fork with the care of an archaeologist or a surgeon, scraping up some mashed potatoes or a bit of cream pie and lifting it again. I want to help him, but something holds me back. He wants to feed himself, it seems to me. He has all the time in the world, and this is something, maybe the only thing, he can still do for himself. The other tables have long been cleared, and the residents are walking again in clusters along the halls or sitting in their recliners, but the old man stays focused on his fork. He smiles when he's done with his meal. He inspects his empty plate, and his smile spreads, a radiant, joyful smile, and he's more like a boy than a man in his 80s. The time that I spent on the second floor, especially near the end of my mother's life, taught me to look for reasons to be grateful. And if you look for them, even on the second floor, they will abound. And so I found grace there in the visitors who would come and spend hours with their family members, a husband who would come every day and meet his wife for dinner and pull the chair out for her, the aides who spent so much time and so much care keeping that facility just beautiful. It's so hard to keep order in a place where disorder is rife, and yet they did. And so when I saw other people acting with grace, I tried to act with grace myself. Watching my mother struggle, especially at the end, brought back my own memories of my childhood and made me reevaluate my own life and what's meaningful about it. I grew up in Colorado. It was a place I really wanted to escape. I didn't realize as a teenager that it was beautiful there. It was only when I got back there as an adult that I realized all I'd really managed to accomplish in my life is trade one form of beauty for another. But that's all right. And so watching my mother near the end of her life made me remember her when she was much younger than I am now. And when I, as a child, was much younger than my daughter is now. And it made me think back to my time in Colorado when we'd first immigrated to the country. And so this poem is called Colorado. And the only word you need to know to understand it is Quetschekuchen, which is the German word for plum cake. Like in German, the word is this long. In English, the word is that long. Something I get teased for quite a bit by my husband and daughter. Summers were spent in motion, trimming the elm hedges and kneading the dough for the Quetschekuchen my father loved. And she sweated over the stove in that cauldron of a kitchen, and she loved it because it was hers. The copper tone range and the chipped cupboards, the pewter plates from the country she'd left behind. And she hadn't left it. Not really. She carried it with her, the country and the silence. And she planted it in the raised beds with the snapdragons and the tiger lilies and the cherry tomatoes that hung like gifts from their furry stems. Lisa line, she'd say, "Komm mal her. Come here, come here. You'll never taste anything sweeter." And she rinsed them with a hose. And she was wrong about many things, but it was true what she said. How many years has it been? How many summers? And I've never tasted anything sweeter than the fruit she coaxed from that unwilling Colorado dirt. Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, I feel like I have a stick in my eye right now. Okay, it's allergy season, I guess. First of all, thank you. Thank you to all of our presenters. I am incredibly moved and touched to witness that. And thank you. I really appreciate you all being here. And I appreciate all of you audience members coming here also for our opening night event. As you all know, Bookstock author events are free. And we get that question all the time, like, how is it that we have these fantastic events and that they're free to the public? And so it is because as John mentioned, we have fantastic sponsors. We have fantastic venue partners, Artistree, who lets us use their space for free. We have amazing authors and poets who come and present and are not paid, who come just for the love of literature and books. And we have great volunteers. This Bookstock team, there are a lot of you here. You guys are the best. And all of us on this team, we put a lot of time into making this festival happen, and each of us does it for our own reason. So for me, it's all about the books. You know, for me, I love to read. I love it when a book makes me laugh. I love it when a book makes me cry. I love it when a book takes me places that I'll never get a chance to go to, or to a time where I'll never be able to experience myself. And what's best is I love it when a book changes my mind. And that's why I believe that books are important, that books need to be accessible to everyone. So if you also support this mission, we do have donation baskets outside. Artistree also has donation baskets to support their mission. But thank you so much for coming out. Housekeeping. Okay, we have the best bookstore in Vermont, Yankee Bookshop, here with Carrie and Christian. Woo woo! They're selling books. And so we also have cookies, yay, in the music room. And we will have all of our presenters there. Please schmooze with them, ask them questions, buy a book, get a book signed. Anyways, we hope you really enjoy this evening. We enjoy having you here. Thank you so much.